Interested in using big data for one-to-one marketing? The kind of marketing that pushes conversion rates through the roof? Well, great news. You're already halfway there. If you're like most retailers, you might feel like you're awash with data, from your website, your stores, email marketing, social media, mobile. If you could just boil all that down into actionable insight, wouldn't that be nice? That's where Insights One can help. We can, and do, take all the data you have across all of your systems and throw it into our, this big thing here. What comes out is really what matters. We call it predictive insight, or what your customers are likely to do or want to buy. We take that insight and then apply it to all of your customers, all 2,234,437 of them. And we can do it in real time. So, what are we talking about here? It means that everyone gets a custom experience like Jack here. When he's browsing your site, Insights One Predictive Analytics will show him products that will really appeal to him. That makes Jack happy, because he spends less time looking and more time finding. Let's talk about Anna. When she calls into customer service, Insights One Predictive Analytics will help your reps deliver suggestions that make sense to Anna, based on the ways she's engaged with your brand. This makes Anna happy too. And when Pietro is using your app, Insights One Predictive Analytics will help you pick the right offers to send to Pietro. The bottom line is that one-to-one marketing makes your customers happier. They get better recommendations, which means they find what they want faster. And that makes things seem more intuitive to them. And that makes their engagement with your brand stronger and longer lasting. And that makes a big impact on your top line. Our clients are reporting conversions up to double their baseline just by leveraging the data they already have, which you already have too. So, you're already halfway to big data. Are you ready for the next step? Contact Insights One today.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Carpe Datum RX webinar series. My name is Shirish Netke from Amberoon Inc., and our topic for today is case studies on big data email marketing. Now, email marketing has been around for at least 15 years now, and in fact, it was considered the killer app of the internet many years ago. And people have sort of been using email marketing to get to their customers and targeting their customers for a long time now. However, people have not talked about big data and analytics in the context of email marketing very much. And one exception to that is our guest today. That's Bob Dutcher from Insights One. Bob is the VP of Marketing for Insights One. And Bob, welcome to our audience.
Thank you.
Welcome to our studio, I guess, and to the audience here. Bob, can you tell us a little bit about Insights One and what you guys are doing in terms of big data and email marketing? People don't tend to use those two words together, but I guess you guys are.
Sure. So Insights One, we're a big data predictive analytics company. We do multi-channel, actually analytics, but one of the channels that we do focus on is email, and we've seen significant improvement with people that we've worked with when they are leveraging big data and predictive analytics within their deployments.
So how is it different from what people have been doing in the past? I mean, you realize that people have been using targeting, and they do a lot of cool stuff with email recently. How is what you're doing different from what's been done, let's say, in the last 10 years or so?
Yes, you are correct. People have been doing some form of targeting for forever. Either they're doing manual targeting or they're using some form of analytics. What we look at is really, what we found is that you can actually improve your ability to target people through email. Generally speaking, we have three simple kind of principles that we like to follow. Mm-hmm. Those principles are, really it's about making sure that every single email counts. It doesn't matter if that email is a confirmation email. It doesn't matter if it's some other form of communication. the idea is every single email should have, or every single customer contact communication should have, should be assisting you in your marketing efforts.
Okay.
The other thing is that more data really equals better predictive power, and that what we found is if you're able to increase the amount of information and data that you have that you're actually analyzing, that you will see significant improvements, typically see significant improvements in predictive power.
Okay.
And the last is actually, it's not only about the quantity of data, but it's also about the variety of the data. And what we found there is that a lot of times folks will only look at their channel for information. So for instance, if I'm doing email marketing, I might look at my email results, mix it in with some other types of information that I have on the customer or the prospect. What we find is that when you take just another single channel or two channels or three channels, that you'll get a significant improvement in predictive power. So for instance, taking email and combining web data, we found a significant increase, in many cases over 30% increase in the predictive power and the conversion rates, because even information from these other channels can be very, very predictive of what actually customer preferences are.
Okay, so now you're getting into stuff which is analytics, and this is something which I guess email marketing folks have talked about, but not as much as detailed as you're talking about right now. So this is interesting. I mean, yeah, we do know that every email counts. We have looked at data and in terms of its predictive power, but I think with some people more than others on that front. But the last part is pretty interesting, like different varieties of data from like different channel sources. That's the kind of stuff which I think is makes it quite different from what people have been doing in the past. Is that right, or is it?
I think so, but you know, it's even a little bit. I would phrase it a little bit even different than that. So definitely, when you look at the quantities of data that we can analyze and leverage for predicting, and the variety of data that we can leverage, that definitely is different.
Okay.
But what we find is that what actually winds up being a bit different is even the approach to email marketing and the approach to targeting and recommendations as a whole.
So looking at it from a completely different point of view than before, yeah.
Yeah. And we actually find that some of the biggest problems that folks have, it actually isn't necessarily the technology or the data. A lot of times it's either cultural or what they've actually just been doing in the past. So they're used to doing traditional, rule-based targeting, or they're used to doing, using various analytics for prediction. But what we find is that there still seems to be a skepticism of, are these predictions correct? There seems to be a lack of confidence in, a data-driven predictive analytics. And I think that's really one of the things that differentiates, the really successful folks out there. If you look at like the Amazons or the Googles, et cetera, I think culturally in their mind, there's just a different mindset that the data and the analytics drives the business,
right?
Not that the business, drives the data.
So you're taking a very analytics centric approach to the email marketing challenge.
Correct.
Would that be the right way to do it?
Correct. And what we find is that the questions that people are asking tend to be a lot of the questions that work with the old methodology of manual targeting and some standard kind of data mining approaches. What we find is that if you actually ask different questions, you'll actually get much better results.
All right. So you have to ask different questions to get different answers.
Correct.
So tell us something which you've seen. I mean, what kind of difference have you seen between, let's say, the traditional way of doing email marketing and what you might call your new perspective on email marketing?
Right. So let's assume that targeting, that we believe in the principle that better targeting is preferred. What we found is that you can have a significant increase in predictive power and the results of actually campaigns based on advanced predictive approaches as well as the big data. So let me give you an example. And one of our clients that we were working with, they had about a $5 million consumer pool that they could potentially target. What they were finding is, while doing about a 3.3 million email campaign, they were able to get about 35,000 clicks with the equivalent conversion rates. What we were able to do is, by supplementing their sources, by taking additional sources of data, so again, making it big data, not just data, and applying machine learning, so in this case, advanced predictive analytics techniques, we were able to identify who would buy much more accurately than the traditional approaches. So in this case, we were able to take, for instance, in the same set, 3.4 million emails and actually get a 57,000 click-through rate, so about a 60% increase with the equivalent conversions.
So now wait a minute. I mean, you're saying here that you went from sending 3.3 million emails to 3.4 million emails, so that was just 100,000 more. And just that 100,000 more actually produced a 60% increase in click-through rate? And is that what happened here, or was it something else?
It was actually, the mix was different. So it wasn't that we just sent an extra 100,000. It was that we actually sent the 3.4 million were a different 3.4 million. So it was basically, we could identify who had a greater propensity to buy. But you know, that to me isn't, that to me is the standard. I want to just target better. Where it gets more interesting is when you actually look at it from the point of view of it's not necessarily about sending the same number of emails and to increase your results. It actually is about what else can I actually do there. So it's a little bit of, I have multiple offers that I can offer. Which offer should I be offering, should I be presenting to an individual at certain times?
Oh, so you're presenting those 3.4 million, each one of them got different offers depending on who they were?
No, in this case, the 3.4 million got the same offer. So that was a pure targeting. But what we found is that if we actually were sending about 1.5 million emails, we could actually hit a 37,000 click rate. So equivalent to what you could do under traditional approaches with 3.3 million.
Okay.
Well, I think this is interesting is it's about making sure that you minimize the contacts. What you now can do is you can take 1.8 million emails that you'd sent in the original campaign and we're getting diminishing return on, and actually send them a different offer and increase the rate. So it's a bit about offer mix.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily about sending, I want to send 3 million emails out every single time for every single product. It's about, I want to send 3 million emails out, which products, you know, or I want to send 5 million emails out, which products should I be sending out given this consumer base?
Yeah, it sounds like you've come a long way from spraying and praying, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What people did like many years ago.
Exactly. Yeah, so what, you know, going on with that, what we found is when you go into, you know, what we actually do, and frankly, when you're leveraging big data and when you're leveraging, you know, advanced predictive analytics techniques, you want to come in with certain, there's certain things that you need to make sense. So for instance, if you have only 1 or 2 products, more traditional approaches to targeting probably makes more sense. If you have, you know, a small addressable, you know, consumer base, 1,000, 10,000.
So you're selling only just a few products, that'd be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a few products, few SKUs, few customers or prospects. Traditional approaches probably would have just as much effect. Maybe slightly, it would be slightly less. But to be honest, I don't know if the slight increase that you would get would justify, you know, a big data type solution. But that said, when you actually have a lot, and you're looking at how to actually mix that up, so which products to present to which users, what we find is that it actually winds up being fairly useful, because using a standard approach where you just look at 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 or 50 segments, that does tell you something. It's better than just blind targeting. But if I can actually do correlations and understand, you know, based on minute details of an individual, what their actual preferences are, that's going to give me much more predictive power. So for instance, in this case, we had a customer that is doing daily deals. In this case, that they have 3.1 members that they actually scored. They have 568 different categories or offers that they present. What we actually wind up doing for them is creating a propensity to buy matrix. What that has is all their users, all the products, and what is the actual propensity for them to actually buy each of those products. What you find is you can actually then look at which products or which offers does this user have the highest propensity to actually take. So in this case, the user number 2 would have a highest propensity to buy offer number 568.
So now this is like personalization, right? Isn't that something we did many years ago too?
Absolutely. Personalization has been around for a long time. This is really what I would say. This is really personalization on steroids. It's taking personalization to the next level, because traditionally personalization was, okay, we have
a segment of 1, or
a segment of 1, or a segment of 10, or a segment of 5. You might use, recency, frequency, monetary. So you
a little bit used for a while.
Exactly. Valid approaches, but that basically gives you 3 levers that you're looking at. And that people are more complex than 3 levers. They're very, very complex. And what actually goes into a buying decision is very complex. So, for instance, what we've been able to do working with some of our clients is actually take social maps. So what you can actually do is looking at friend networks that an individual might have. By actually taking that and putting that into the data mix, what you can actually start seeing is that you can actually start imputing preferences based on who these people know. So, for instance, if I'm looking for a new car and most of my friends have Toyota Camrys, there's probably a reasonable chance that that's a car that I'm going to at least look at. So you can actually get very, very sophisticated and actually even start imputing preferences from others.
So what you're saying essentially is instead of having 3 or 4 levers to pull, you have many more. Levers to sort of
really
predict people's buying behavior.
What actually happens is when you're using a machine learning microsegmentation approach, what actually happens is the machine itself is looking for minute correlations that actually result in buying in certain behavior or buying activity. From these minute correlations, and again, there might be hundreds of them, there might be thousands of them. By these minute correlations, they can actually then determine, what is your propensity to buy a certain item, and that's really what it comes down to. It's at the micro level, not at kind of the more kind of aggregate level.
So tell me a little bit about, I guess this looks like pretty good theory in terms of correlations and what do you say, propensity to buy and trying to predict people's behavior. How do people actually implement this? How do what's the block and tackle part of implementing a solution like this in a real world environment? Suppose I have, let's say, 5 million users or 10 million users. How do I implement something like this?
Yeah, the approach that we typically take is it's more of an incremental approach to it. My belief is that the kind of the big bang approach doesn't work. I mean, many of the folks may have been involved in the big data warehousing thing where everybody had to build a big data warehouse and they had to collect every piece of information in the company.
Right.
And then in the end, they were going to have a 360-degree view of customers, and everybody was going to be great.
Right.
What most of those, of course, found is they failed because they were too complex, they were too big. After 5, 10 years in huge tens of millions, tens of millions of dollars spent, a lot of folks were somewhat better off, but not necessarily better off. There's been different approaches taken. What we actually believe is that it's not about getting all of your data sources, bringing them together, and running advanced predictive analytics on it. It's really about an incremental approach of taking just one additional source or 2 additional sources. So that additional source, for instance, might be transactional information. Usage information we found to be highly predictive in nature. So for folks that have within the online gaming industry. We found that that behavior within the game is highly predictive. For people that are, for instance, maybe season ticket holders.
Different sort of behavior then.
Yeah, you can actually track and measure what their actual usage is of their tickets, and if you have some method of actually analyzing what they're actually buying externally, etc. So what we found is cell phone with telephones, banking, etc. The usage is very useful. We've also found very interesting things, which is sometimes non-intuitive sources of information can be very predictive in nature. So, for instance, call center notes. We're working with one client that actually had their standard transactional information that we thought would be pretty much the key to the predictive power. In this case, we actually found that their call center notes actually, so an unstructured play in this case, was winding up to be very, very predictive of their activity of what they would buy. It also then played into what, if they would actually cancel the service as well, which actually, again, in email marketing can be very useful because it's not only about what offer you're presenting them, but it may also be where they are in the.
So you can predict churn from a customer likely to churn or go away.
You can do that, yes, yeah, and actually, interesting enough, you can actually predict who. We've actually found in some cases where we with one of our clients where we're able to predict that the customer will buy. We don't know what channel they'll buy on. We're actually trying to work with them to figure out so we can actually start figuring out, okay, this customer is then a buy, but what channels do they prefer to buy on? So you can actually figure out that. But what we're actually looking at in this case is taking that customer, and we know that they're then a buy. So, for instance, if they're a season ticket holder, that we know that they have a very, very high propensity to continue to buy that. What we found, though, is so if I'm taking an email marketing approach, instead of offering them to buy, in this customer's case, what we're actually starting to do is figure out, we know they're then a buy. They might not buy through an email conversion. They might buy through point of sale or through web or something like that. But what we actually will start doing is instead of promoting the buy to them, what we'll do is promote add-on sales or post-buy stuff or pre-buy stuff. So basically, where we can actually increase the value of that customer because we know they're then a buy anyway. So that kind of stuff is very interesting.
That's interesting in the sense that you can actually predict what people are going to do before they do it, and that there's always money in that. But can you tell us a little bit about what kind of results do you expect? I mean, how much of an increase in revenue are you getting? Like a 3% or 4% increase in revenue, or is it more than that? In terms of just what you've seen with the results that you've got from Black.
Typically, I mean, it varies, of course, but typically we see usually almost in every case at least 10% lift, so revenue lift.
Oh, okay. That changes things a little bit.
Yeah. But in some cases we've actually seen a doubling of the results. So we've seen significant results.
So like 100%? Is that what you think?
Yes. Yeah. We have seen it up to 100%.
So 10 to 100%. Yeah, that's kind of broad range, but it's definitely significant.
It is a broad range, but it's significant. A lot of it has to do with what their previous practices were, how predictive in nature the data is, etc. Again, a lot of times, we'll start off with just one additional source. So we'll take the email, combine it with take the web and combine it with the email. And with that, for instance, it winds up being fairly predictive in nature. And what we find is that sometimes there's preconceived notions of certain things not being helpful, and we actually find that they actually are helpful. So, for instance, web traffic that people have, where I don't know who's on the actual website, so I can't an anonymous web traffic. That actually still winds up being fairly predictive, because the activities that they're actually doing on the web will provide signals of preferences that actually translate into not only web behavior but email behavior too. So because it's basically telling you what are the mutual interests, what interests are correlated.
Thought you seem to be taking a very, let's say, a strategic approach to this whole email stuff, and I don't think a lot of us have not necessarily looked at email from a strategic point of view. Some of may have, but it looks like you're looking at it as a major asset to be on something which you can work on and have a completely different approach, a different perspective. Can you elaborate, like, how you should look at email as from a strategic point of view? Because it's not clearly spray and pray. It's not just like segmentation. It's much more than that. So if it were, let's say, if you were to tell a CEO of a company or a chief marketing officer of a company, what would you tell them about?
Right. So up to this point, we've been talking primarily about how do you take, your approaches and how do you target better? So how do you do what you're doing today and make it better? Which is very important.
Which is important. It's incremental, and you're getting your 10%. Whatever.
Absolutely. It's very important.
100% changes there. That's good.
But what we believe is that it actually can be transformative in the process. And I think the really successful folks look at it to actually change how they actually approach their marketing efforts, whether that be email, whether that be web, etc. And what we found is that if you really want to make email marketing and big data and predictive analytics a strategic asset, what we've really found is that it can actually help you with many of your strategic goals. So for instance, from a KPI perspective, you can strategically define KPIs and use the analytics to help you achieve that. What we also find is that you can actually use the data to actually transform what you're doing. Again, what we find is there's a lot of people out there that a lot of organizations out there that have a set way of doing things that conform very well to traditional targeting approaches, and to culturally shift them into different approaches sometimes can be kind of difficult. It's something that's different. But what we found is if the organization can start shifting, they can actually see major results by shifting kind of how they operate. And then the other thing is it's the silo thing on getting data in. It's also about making sure that the data goes out. The information that you're getting from the email marketing can be very predictive in nature and helpful to the other channels of marketing. Plus, of course, nowadays everything is multi-channel anyway. Email is driving web traffic, which might be driving a point of sale or store traffic, etc. So there's a lot of correlation between all these.
So now, do you see this sort of strategic approach as a difference between, let's say, your customers who are doing really well versus those who are sort of staying in the old school approach? Does this make a difference in terms of the results that people are getting?
Yeah, I believe so. And let me explain why. It's a bit of a different mindset in some cases. So let's take the previous example with the daily deal email. For the user number 2, the offer number 568, so the last offer that they have, is clearly the best offer to provide. They have a higher propensity to buy that. What we've actually found, though, is that with some customers, what they're actually looking at doing is, item number 568 might be a $10 item or a $50 item, whereas offer number 1 is a $5,000 item, or maybe item number 1 has a 15% margin versus a 3% margin for item number 568. So even though you have a higher propensity to buy item number 568, you actually might want to actually offer them item number 1 or number 2 or number 3 or number 10. The reason is if you want to optimize profitability, you want to actually start offering items that have high propensities to buy, but that have a higher profit margin or a higher revenue side, depending on what you're optimizing. And what we find is you actually want to mix it. So what we've actually been working with clients on is actually how to mix that, because you don't want to exceed your revenue targets, but then miss your margins.
Right.
So you want to
actually change. You can actually put that kind of objectives or those kind of objectives into your into your optimization problem.
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. You can start optimizing your mix. So what we've actually done is it's not necessarily that, hey, I'm going to get a 30% lift on revenue. You actually might be happy to settle for a 20% lift on revenue if you can also get a 10% lift in margin. Whereas, and that's margin percent, that is. Whereas, the 30% lift might actually keep you with the same margin percentage that you had. So it's that kind of trade-off that we found that people want to, that organizations are starting to look at. And again, it might be an inventory thing. You might want to, you might have certain items in inventory that you want to promote over certain other items because you want to reduce inventory. And that again, you can use the data to help you out there. It can even help you when you're actually trying to determine, what kind of discounts I want to give on this stuff.
Okay, so that's a high level of granularity you can talk about then.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you know that you have 50,000 people with a high propensity to buy, and you have 40,000 items or 20,000 items, you can actually look at, okay, this item, we wanted to get rid of it fast, but now we may not have to get rid of. We may not have to actually push it with such deep discounts because we already have a lot of people that want this. On the other side, if there's a lot fewer,
Actually, let me just stop you for one administrative matter. There are a lot of people asking questions, and for those of you who have a question, you can just go into the chat window and send me a chat message. Send the organizers a chat message from where you are, and we'd be happy to answer those questions at the end of the webinar. So again, sorry for the interruption, Bob, but you look like you're getting into a very high level of granularity. Now it sort of becomes more complex to do. Now, it's not that people haven't thought about this before. It's just that implementing it in a practical fashion may have, I don't know, was possible before or not before you guys talked about it. But it would be interesting to see a little bit more specificity. So, like for example, what would the user experience? What does the user actually see when they look at when they have a more optimized system?
Sure. So this is something that we've actually just started working with clients on. So it's rather I would say it's kind of advanced. So what we've actually been looking at is even the template of offers that are given to people. So for instance, this is a fairly simplistic example, but I'll get into how we can actually mix it up even.
So what do you have? You have 3 templates here and you've done an A/B or analysis for these 3? Or
Right. So what we found is, in this case, this was a daily deal, a company that was sending out, daily emails, of course. What they did is they had a standard template. The template had the daily fresh deal, popular deal, and the closest to expiration. Very, very common format or template that many people use. What they did is they actually started mixing up how the offers were actually presented. So they had the daily fresh deal, and then they used 2 deals that came from the recommendation engine from us. Okay. And then what we did is we said, okay, what if all 3 of these deals are coming from the recommendation engine? So this still allows, kind of a man-only kind of approach, or man/traditional approach, versus, a man-machine approach versus a, purely targeted approach. So pretty straightforward.
Now, actually, one would expect that daily fresh deal or the daily deal is something which we've been doing for years. Again, people have been very successful at it. So one would have thought that would give you a major lift in revenue right away, and then you've got a couple of recommendations. Was that what you're finding most too?
Yeah. So what we actually found in this case was that the conversion rates, we did get a conversion rate increase by keeping the daily deal and then having the recommendation engine providing, the 2 other deals. That we found that in actual practice, this is actually in a live usage case, that they were getting 8% lift with that. If they would actually change around their formula a bit and actually use the recommendation engine for all 3 boxes or 3 offers, they actually got a 22% lift. So again, by changing changing a little bit of the way that they had been traditionally doing it versus how they could do it, was significant. But where I found what we're actually now starting to talk to people about is actually bring it to a whole nother level, which is actually saying, why do you need one common template for everybody? Different people have different preferences, and why provide offers to somebody that have a 0% probability of actually buying it?
So in the previous one, you were talking about the same template for different people, but 3 different recommendations.
Right. So people would get different offers.
So they would get 3 offers.
Based on the recommendation engine.
And what you're saying now is
be different for you and myself.
What you're saying now is not everybody wants 3 offers.
Exactly.
Okay.
So if somebody has an exceptionally high propensity to buy a certain item and has a very low propensity to buy anything else, you're better off trying to position that one item than you are to position the one item plus a bunch of things that they're just going to ignore. You actually might miss the message in some cases.
Well, so that means somebody will get sort of recommendations to buy a golf club, or somebody else will get a tennis racket. Somebody may get both.
Yeah. I mean, the general idea a lot of times within marketing, of course, is if I'm doing messaging or anything like that, I pick the 3 highest messages that are going to work to somebody, throw them out there because I know one of them's going to stick. But if I can tell you this is the one message that's going to stick to them, why include the other 2? But in some cases, you actually might want to have 3 offers. Some cases, you might want to have 4 offers. Now, interesting enough, we've actually started engaging and talking to them. Frequency. Discussions around frequency have been around forever.
You just send emails on Monday morning or Tuesday morning or Thursday morning, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And there's a lot of discussions around, should I send it once a day, once a week, twice a day, every other day? There's frequency, and that's actually, there's been discussions on that quite a bit. What we're starting to find is that in some cases, the data itself, you can actually use the data and the analytics itself to actually start personalizing the frequency. You can actually find, is it more effective to communicate with this person, on a daily basis or a weekly basis or twice a day or 3 times a day? You can actually see that. That, of course, helps you from an attrition point of view, also from just customer fatigue. I mean, I don't know how many times do you get the daily deal in your inbox, you click on it and you don't even open it and you just delete it.
Yeah, some more than I need, A lot of them are more than I need, a lot of them are less than I need.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there are some that I have been getting where I know that what they're sending me is interesting to me. So even though I might not necessarily convert on that deal, I at least open it, which increases my probability of conversion down the line.
Okay.
So you can actually start looking at, and I will let you know. I mean, there are issues that the data itself can be a challenge to do some of these things, because you do need data to be able to provide personalization and prediction at this level. But you can actually do it. It is actually possible.
Okay, so this is personalization not just to a person, but the time of the day when he gets the email and how many offers he gets.
Yeah, what the actual email looks like, what the actual what the actual timing is, etc.
So, and you've got lift and you've got like revenue impact with this kind of stuff already. You've got customers who've actually been doing this.
We actually, with the frequency and with the content, that's actually we're starting to work with customers on how to on doing that. We've started experimenting with it. The other thing that's
already
sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. With mixing up the actual offers from recommendations, absolutely.
Okay. So I think that's a lot of stuff to absorb in a short period of time, and I know some people have a few questions here, but before we get to that. Could you sort of sum up what we've talked about? What should be our takeaways from this conversation? For somebody
sure.
Sort of, if we could summarize that would be useful before we get to.
So I would summarize that one, the cultural aspect. You have to actually culturally that can be a major challenge. So there's a shift in actually mindset that actually can help you improve results. Some of the old questions that people are asking, there are better new questions to be asked. So that's
you change the questions and you change the answers.
That's what we've actually been finding. That it changes the equation and how people should look at and measure things. But now beyond that, what we found is that if you take some standard simple approaches, and by the way, these work these are principles that work even outside of big data. but we found, with big data, you can actually, there's no limitations to volume, there are no limitations to variety, et cetera. So what we found is, obviously you want to make sure that every single email counts. I mean, right. That's just 101 type of thing. And it's surprising that folks, there's still a lot of emails that go out to somebody that doesn't have something in there that's promoting the products, the company, add-on sales, upselling, et cetera. So make every single email count. More data, the better. Mm-hmm. Channel variety, really important. Those things, they're very, very big improvements.
So you've touched on all the variety, volume, velocity, all the 3 V's of big data here.
Exactly.
Okay.
And the beauty of big data is, again, there's no limitations to how much you can have. Traditional approaches, you actually have to start narrowing down the amount of information. You have to aggregate the data. You have to maybe exclude some data. You have to, you're not looking at all the segments, et cetera. The other thing is, so this basically allows you to bring it to the next level. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, you can actually start looking beyond just the standard questions of, I want to, increase my conversion rate. You can actually start looking at how can I increase and improve the overall business itself.
Like profitability or
margins, profitability, inventory, et cetera. And you can actually start transforming your processes and make your processes data-driven as opposed to this is the way that we've always done it. The other thing is that don't forget that email marketing is one piece of the pie, but there's a lot of other channels out there too that have similar issues to you, and that what you're doing actually can improve them. Actually, an interesting attribution thing that we've seen is that with one of our clients, what we were doing is they were actually promoting, so they actually promoted other brands via email. Those other brands, what they would do, their promotions would drive them to one of their client sites. So, Macy's, Toyota, whatever the other site was. What we actually found was that the email targeting that they were doing was actually increasing activity on their site, even though there's nothing in these emails that would specifically drive traffic to their site. What we were finding is that people would see the email, they'd go and search in, and it was actually increasing search traffic to the sites. So that there's actually there is an attribution of other impacts on other parts of the organization due to email marketing. Okay. The other major thing is the incremental approach is, in my opinion, key. Right. You don't want to look at 15 different channels, 5 petabytes of data. It's add one channel, see success, add an additional channel, see additional success, etc.
Okay. So, Bob, we have a few questions from the audience here, and for those of you who have more questions, feel free to send us a chat message addressed to the organizers. So let me go through some of the questions there. The first question is, what do I do different Monday morning? I mean, how do I get started? I mean, all the theory and the concept is really cool, but how do I do things differently? And what, besides giving you a call to see what we can do?
We appreciate that, but
yeah, what do I do immediately? Like, get down to the tactics.
Yeah, whether you need a big data solution or not, the one thing I would do on Monday morning is start looking at what are the other sources of data, and don't have any preconceived notions that certain data might not be useful. Mm-hmm. So look at all the potential sources of information, data that you can get, including data that might be coming from outside, such as social graphs, etc. That information might be coming from elsewhere. You can look at, then the questions you want to start asking is, how easily accessible is this data? Is it something that I can get? There's other questions that you obviously want to start asking too about cleanliness and quality and things like that, but that starts getting down the road. The other thing that you can start thinking about is, if I had the perfect world, what would I actually do if I had a blank slate? If I knew exactly who was going to buy what tomorrow, what would I do? And the answers to that, obviously nobody can give you that much detail. But the answers to that actually starts transforming the actual business, and you can start thinking about what different processes could we actually have in place that could actually transform the business.
So your advice to people is to start thinking differently and looking for more sources of data and different questions.
So think traditionally from the data point of view, but then starting to think a little bit differently.
Yep. Okay. So let me get to the next question here. The question here is, how do I work with my IT department to implement a solution like this? Again, people are asking, like, get down to brass tacks of, do I have to get IT involved? Do that? Do they have to? Is there a lot of software to be installed to make this work? And I guess that's the nature, the context of the question.
Sure. Good question. So from a data perspective, of course, IT has to be involved. So IT has to supply the data. So with the extraction, etc. So there is IT involvement. On that side, though, there is not an infrastructure. In our case, our solution is a cloud-based solution. So as a result, all the infrastructure is off premises. So as a result, you're not having IT going through a big development effort, etc. It's more of just a collaboration to determine, the data, and then everything else is done, outside of your IT department. So very similar to people that may be using like Salesforce.com or something like that.
Okay. So let me ask the next question here is, we have 7 million users in our mailing list. Will this process help me identify the top 20% of my clients?
So that's actually an interesting question, because it's actually something that we hear a bit. The answer to that is yes, it will identify the top 20% of clients, but I like to think that that's actually, I would actually rephrase the question. And the reason is there's a little bit of a thought of, I have to identify my top 20%, I have to, identify my bottom 20%, etc. What we like to think about it is you have 7 million customers. You want to identify which each of those preferences are within those 7 million customers and maximize that relationship that you have with them. So it's really identifying for each product, for each customer, what are the top things that they want to buy, what are the top customers by product, etc. So it's actually more of a matrix question, so that you can maximize the value of every single customer in that mix.
Okay, actually, I have a sort of follow-up question. It's not from the audience, but what is there a kind of a limit into is there an upper limit or lower limit of the number of emails lists you can have? Is it like 1 million, 5 million, 100 million, or can we do it for, let's say, for 10,000 people? Can we optimize for that, or do we need a bigger list or a smaller list than that?
Yeah. So the answer is there is no real limit. I think, though, to be fair, there's some constraints that I would put on if you're investigating a true big data, machine learning, advanced predictive analytics type solution, because this solution, if you have 10,000 consumers, if you have only a few products, etc., it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to look at a solution like this. Traditional approaches would probably be much more effective use of your resources. That said, what we find is when you have millions of customers, typically it's 1 million plus or so. Our typical clients that we work with have anywhere between 3 million and 100 million plus type consumers. So fairly large populations. They tend to have quite a few products. So more than 50 or 100, or in many cases they have 100 or more. So there's a product mix in there. And then the other thing that we find is usually from a data perspective, if all the data that's out there that they could analyze is relatively small, megabytes, kind of gigabyte type level, traditional approaches might be almost as effective as this. So typically, yeah, we're talking about terabytes, which usually means you're looking at transactional level data. So transactional click data, huge. That's the data that you're mixing in there, and that winds up being the very predictive in nature, the call notes, etc. It's something that's very very voluminous.
So here I've got another question from the audience, and the question is, I'm already using ExactTarget for my email management. Is this a substitute for ExactTarget, or do I have to replace that with a system like what you're talking about?
No, the answer to that is they're complementary solutions. So we find a lot of clients that we work with, they'll have ExactTarget, they'll have responses, they'll have constant contact. A lot of times what we do actually find is that there's a lot of internal. So they may even start out with one of these vendors, but they'll kind of build their standard internal email distribution system. So our solution is complementary to that in that we provide the list that then can be loaded in, or the list that can be loaded in, and then would be actually sent out. So that's so complementary. Same thing goes with like marketing automation systems as well. You still have marketing automation systems. This basically just feeds into those systems.
Okay. So the real value that I guess people are looking for is how do we make the email more effective? How do you make email as opposed to like how do we send more of them or less of them or manage the how do you make the light bulb brighter rather than how do you make the light bulb?
Yeah. It's not about the actual process of the mechanics of emailing or managing a campaign. It's about how do I make that more effective. So you can actually make the process more effective. You can make the content that's being sent out more effective, and you can make the targeting much more effective.
Okay.
So no, it's very complementary in nature. And all of our clients have some form of either combination of automation systems and email systems, whether it be something that is homegrown or something that they purchased.
So let me ask you, we have time for just one last question here from the audience, and the question is, you're talking about taking a very different approach to email marketing. Can you give us some idea what the ROI is? Because obviously we don't want to do it unless there is some positive ROI. I'm sort of paraphrasing from the question there, but
yeah.
I think it's a simple question: is does this approach have an ROI or not?
The approach definitely has an ROI. Getting ROI numbers, of course, is very specific to a specific instance because you have to, a lot of factors taken into account. If you are, if you get a 10% lift on, $2,000, you'd have a hard time justifying more than a $20 expense. So if you're getting a 10% lift on a $10 million business, then of course you can justify it. But yeah, definitely in the customers that we're working with, they're seeing a very positive and in most cases significant ROI.
Okay, so I think that's all the time we have for right now. For those of you who are listening, if you have any questions, send an email to carpedatumrx@amberone.com. and we'll respond to those questions. Bob will respond to you personally with any specific questions you may have. And that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you all for attending. And Bob, thank you for talking to all our viewers here.
Thank you. And thank you for having me, and thank you for listening.
Bye.